Welcome, everyone. You're listening to Structure Talk, a Structure Tech presentation. My name is Bill Ulrich, alongside Tessa Marie, Ruben Saltzman. As always, your three-legged stool coming to you from the Northland, talking all things houses, home inspections, and anything else that's rattling around in our brains. Welcome to today's episode. Tessa, Ruben, good to see you.
Hello.
And
good to see you, Bill.
Yeah,
welcome back.
Yeah. Well, welcome back. Yes, back in the hot seat.
Shaky podcast last week.
Our two-legged stool was a little rickety without you. The sign-off was not very smooth. I'll just say that.
I imagine everything went just swimmingly. So you guys are hard critics. You're tough on yourselves. I know.
Yeah. Well, welcome back either way.
Good to have you. Good to have you back.
Well, let's kind of get to the topic of the hour. We have a guest today with us, a fellow home inspector, as I understand, entrepreneur, kind of serial entrepreneur, coming to us from Santa Fe, New Mexico. Is that correct?
That is right.
Awesome. That voice you're here in the background is Istvan Zsako. And Istvan owns a home inspection company. It's Zsako Home Inspections. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. And I understand you and Ruben have recently met through IEB, Inspector Empire Builder, and you guys were at a conference together and got to know each other and started spinning yarns about all the sewer inspecting that you do. And Ruben, I'm going to turn it over to you and kind of let you take it from here, but we're going to pick a brain today and learn a little bit about sewer inspecting.
Yeah, well, Istvan and I were just talking about podcasts, and then he was saying, well, what do you use? Have you ever tried Riverside? And I said, what's Riverside? And that's what we are now using for our podcast. So if you notice a marked improvement in the audio quality, we can all thank Istvan for the suggestion. We're using this instead of Zoom, and we're still kind of trying it out. It's, we're having a little difficulty here and there getting our mics to work and our video to work. It seemed like Zoom just works, but we're boring our audience with that. Istvan and I talked about
what's different from any other podcast we do.
Right. But Istvan, I wonder if you could just start off, tell us about your journey about starting off. You were a contractor. How'd you get into home inspections, and what else are you doing besides home inspections? Give us a little bit of your timeline, your history.
Definitely. And thanks for having me. It's such a pleasure to be able to be here, be with you guys, and speak with your audience as well. I was doing construction for a long time, licensed contractor. And one day a buddy of mine came up to me and said, would you like to be a home inspector? And I had no idea what that actually meant, but I said yes. It was a change. I'd been doing construction for a while, and construction, I was a trim carpenter. So I got to do some really specialty high-end stuff that was really cool. The things that we got to work with, working on multi-million-dollar homes. And it was it was really rewarding and often very challenging. But I was looking for a change and wondering what would come after this. And it landed in my lap. I said, yes, what is it? What do I have to do? He said, okay, I'll train you. I just want you to go get a formal training so that I don't have to explain everything that we do. You have an idea of what we do. And then from there, I'll take over and keep training. And I was like, cool. So I did a training with AHIT at that time because it was right up in Colorado, came back. And by the time I came back, I had, within less than 30 days, I had my license. I mean, well, we don't have a license here, but I had the training, I had my insurance, I had the business registered, I had bank accounts, emails. I was just like ready to go and just hit the ground running. And so that's what got me into it. And,
Istvan, how many years ago was that?
That was going on 12 years now.
Okay. All right. And then what has been your journey with sewer inspections?
Along the way, I saw that I was at home inspections, and there was this guy that I'd see often. He just did sewer. That's all he did. Like, he was a retired plumber. He just did sewer inspections. He didn't even do repairs anymore. Just inspections. And I always saw him around. People didn't ask that much about it, but once in a while I would get an inquiry, and I realized I could be doing that service. And why am I not doing that service? Because lots of times people think, well, people don't want it. And that's not true. A lot of people want their sewers looked at. And I decided to get a training, which was okay. And I still had a lot of questions after my training. Got the camera, launched the service, And in the first year, I mean, I launched it like in April. So it took like a good month or two to get some traction. And by the end of the year, I made over, 40K with just doing that one service. And the thing that I realized in doing the service was there's a lot of sewer problems out there.
Yeah.
And that's where I was just surprised at how much there was. And talking with other people, a lot of people wanted to get into it and were curious about it. And they started flying out to go on ride-alongs with me. And that's where I started to realize there is a need for a training, a really good training, because the training I had, I was left with so much questions. I didn't feel like I could even recommend it to somebody. And I decided to start putting something together, and the response has been really, really good. I last time I looked, I think I've already had somewhere about 150, 160 home inspectors that I've gotten to train, and they're out there doing sewer camera inspections.
How long have you been doing this training, Istvan?
Formally, as sewer camera training, it's been a year and a half.
Okay. Do you have your own certification? Or do you offer
Yes, I do.
certification?
It's a certification. It's not like like a big educator. It's a certification that they can carry for taking the class. And yes.
Okay. What is that? I'm just curious. Like, are there certifications out there for people that do sewer inspections?
There's no licensing, there's no regulation over it. There might be a rare area of a state or something that might have something written, but most of the time it's not. I know
Okay.
Texas did require that it had to be a licensed plumber for a long time, and then where licensed home inspectors could start doing it. And I think it was about the license. They were a licensed industry. They were able to start doing it. So they're doing it.
I thought
Okay.
Texas was one of those states where you could just do whatever you wanted. I mean, what are they regulating anything for?
Oh, I'll tell you, Bill, I know a little bit about licensing in Texas, and they are the worst. They got this thing called the Texas Real Estate Commission, TREC, and they mandate what home inspectors' reports need to look like. I mean, that's the level of detail they go down to. I don't think you're going to find a more heavily regulated state when it comes to home inspections outside of Texas. They are
Surprising.
crazy over the
They're
top.
sure is in conflict with the bravado of we're an open and free to do whatever we want down here.
Well,
When it
yeah,
comes to
and
certain things.
on the flip side of it, California is not a licensed state. So go figure.
Yeah, which that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, we just became a licensed state. Yeah, it just happened officially 2 years ago, but it just got enforced a year. It's a very new thing here.
What do
Okay.
people need to do to get licensed? What are the licensing requirements?
It was a lot of lobbying. They've been trying to do it for, I don't know, last 12 years, something like that. And they showed interest. It would get to state when they were passing all the other stuff, but it just seemed to get dropped. It never made it to the end. And then 2 years ago, it finally made it. And then it took them a year and a half to get it actually enforced. So it's here and it's good. It stops your fly-by-night guys that are trying to do it on the side or people that are not really invested. So I think as a whole, it's really good for the consumer to have people that are really invested in what they do doing inspections.
Sorry for taking us down that rabbit trail. But getting back to this concept of sewers, Tessa and I were kind of, going back and forth. What's the housing stock like in Santa Fe? And are you seeing sewer lines that are 100 plus years old all the way up to brand new? Or are most of the lines that you're seeing kind of PVC and of the newer variety?
That is a great question. Love the question because most people think it's a brand new house. I don't need the sewer line looked at. The reality is every house should have a sewer camera inspection done. We've had brand new construction where house after house had damaged sewer lines. And I know of other stories where there was 2 repairs done at different times to a sewer line after somebody had just moved in because it got damaged during the construction. So they use backhoes to backfill, and that can puncture or damage or crush a sewer line. All the machinery that's driving over the pipe after it's been buried, depending on the depth, could easily be affected by that as well. Settling, because they didn't compact the trench very well, then you get settling and the pipes start pulling apart and separate. It's been one thing after another, and that's just new construction.
Wow.
And as you get older, the chances do get higher. So when somebody's looking at a home and they start looking at something that's already 20 years old, they definitely should get it. The newer homes, yeah, it's less likely to have a problem, but once they start getting about 20 years, they're looking at trees have grown, so there's roots, homes have settled, things have moved. There's just going to be more chance of a problem there. And maybe the pipe's fine, but it didn't have a joint glued completely, so it was leaking a little bit, and it was just a matter of time. Roots found it and start growing in it. If they get big enough, they start cracking the pipe, and it just leads to on and on and on. And then when you start getting about 40 years, that's where you start getting to cast iron, clay.
And presumably you have all of those products in the ground in your market.
Yes. Yeah. Unless you are in a new city that just started building in the last 20 years, you're going to see all of this stuff, because you always have the downtown, you have the older neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods, if they haven't had a problem with the sewer line or had it looked at or had any reason to replace it, it's still going to be the original material that was installed.
Now, you mentioned Orangeburg. Tell us about Orangeburg a little bit, because we've talked about it. I don't know if we've talked about it on the podcast, though.
Yeah, Orangeburg is an interesting one. It was, back, like the 20s, 30s, they built this pipe. It's during there was the war and recession, materials are scarce, and all of a sudden they have to come up with an alternative to keep building, sewer lines for these new homes. And they took wood, pulp, and tar. They don't look that way. I've seen one that is actually, I have a piece of it in my studio that has never been used. And it looks like ABS. It looks like a thick, hard plastic. It's super dense, but over time, it didn't take the moisture very well. It didn't handle the way they thought it would actually handle. And it starts to delaminate. It starts to collapse. So if you're going through a pipe and it kind of looks a little bit ribbed and you start seeing this oval shape instead of round, it's a good chance it's Orangeburg. And most of the time you'll start seeing bubbles, delamination, falls apart. Sometimes at the connection, it literally looks like it's the end of that. It looks like the end of a cardboard tube that you'd find in a roll of toilet paper or paper towels. And it's just disintegrating at the edge. It's wild when you see it to imagine that they had built a sewer line that was going to hold water, be wet all the time, out of something that you would make paper out of.
Yeah. Just enough tar and we should be good forever, right? That was the thought.
Do you find a lot of that stuff out there, Istvan? Or, if you had 100 houses, would you find it on 1, 2?
In the older homes that are going to be 60s and older, we would expect to see it. We don't see it every time. Sometimes it is just cast iron. Other times they did use clay, but we expect it. We have some neighborhoods that when we go to, and this is something to look for, if you're about to buy a house and it is an older neighborhood, when you're driving down the street, see how many cuts are in the road. You'll see these cuts coming from each house to the center of the road, kind of lining up with the manhole cover in the street. And that's an indication that they've had to replace a sewer line, replace a sewer line, replace a sewer line. So when you're in a neighborhood like that, you're thinking about buying a house, you'd want to have that sewer camera inspection to see if it's been replaced or if it needs to be replaced.
That's a great tip. I've never thought about that. Love it. So what's some of the worst stuff you've seen doing sewer inspections?
Some things are fun. Some things are really bad. We've seen a ground rod from the electrician rammed right through a sewer line.
Oh, no.
And so you see something in the pipe that's going through the pipe and you're wondering, what is that? And it's all oxidized, bluish green from the copper. It's and then you go locate it with your locator. And it's near, the electrical panel, and there's the ground rod just rammed right through it. You got scissors that get stuck right in the connection, and they're even open. They're just sprawled out, just waiting for paper and stuff to get stuck on it. I love one. I go and it's on a septic tank. And the cleanouts are probably about 10 or 12 feet away from the house. Usually they're pretty close to the house, but those are further away. I'm running the camera. I go towards the tank. Then I always go back towards the house because I want to get as much of the sewer line as possible that I can access. And as I'm going back towards the house, I only go about 8 feet, and all of a sudden I can't go anymore. I'm like, what the heck's going on? It's kind of dark in the tube, and whatever's there, it seems black. I can't really see what it is, but my camera can't get past it. So get out the locator, start walking around. And as I'm walking around, as I'm coming close to where it is, the owner, she comes out and is wondering, what are you doing? Because she can hear, if you ever heard a locator, it's got this really whiny, high-pitched noise to it. And I'm just like, oh, well, my camera couldn't go any further. So I'm trying to locate, what it is, see if I can determine why it's not going any further and just find out where it is. So I'm locating it, finally go right up to her gate. And right next to the gate, right below one of the posts, that thing is just screaming high pitch. I'm like, looks like one of the fence posts, and this is beautiful custom metal gate. One of the posts, metal post, I told her, it looks like your metal post is got installed and went through your sewer line, has damaged the sewer line. And
Yikes.
you could see her just kind of turn red and just want to explode. And she goes, I just had that installed.
Oh
Like,
no.
well, I know
Well,
you can call about it.
that's
So
crazy. Well, Istvan, should you get a sewer inspection if you're not connected to a city sewer? Like if you have a septic system, is that still something you'd recommend doing?
excellent question. And a lot of people often feel, if like my state is in New Mexico, they require the septic tank to be pumped and inspected during for any real estate transaction. So that's already occurring. And the answer is yes. And the way I wanted to point that out is lots of times if you're in a state where it needs to be pumped, people think, well, the tank's going to be looked at, so we don't need the sewer line looked at. It's fine. And they don't know that most of those companies are just going to pump the tank, look at the tank. And the sewer line from the tank to the house can have the same problems that a sewer line from a city main to the house can have. Now, sometimes those lines can be shorter, which a lot of people think also, well, most of the time they're only 10 feet. That's not true. I've seen one to a septic tank that went 250 feet, had 2 sets of cleanouts along the way before I actually got to the tank. So there's no truth that, yes or no, it does or doesn't, or they're inspecting it. The question is, if it's going to be pumped, like somebody thinks, well, I know the seller's supposed to have the tank pumped, so I don't need it. Ask the company that's pumping it, did you look at the sewer line? Or if you can talk to them before, are you going to look at the sewer line?
Mhm.
Most of the time, they're going to say, no, we're not. Some might be able to add it on. And if they're not, then you can find somebody else, maybe your home inspector or another company that can come out and look at it. So just because it's on a septic tank does not mean that you should not get a sewer camera inspection. You should always get one. It is a sewer line. It could have the same problems. I've seen an 8-foot section right before it got to the septic tank. They had put a new septic tank, and when they backfilled around it, they had compressed so hard that the pipe actually pulled out. And so now there's this big dip right before where it was supposed to connect. So a lot of things can happen. Yeah, always look at the sewer line, because if there is a problem, those kind of problems can be very expensive to fix.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
why wouldn't you want to know what's there that you can't see, but you can see if you use this one service? It just makes perfect sense.
It does. And from the consumer side, sometimes they feel like it's an upsell. They're trying to get another $250 to $350 out of me. No, that person's actually trying to save you potential for, a couple thousand up to $15,000, $20,000 problem.
Yeah.
So it actually is a really good thing. If somebody offers it, I would take it.
Now, what do you do in situations where you can't find a clean out?
That's exciting.
Yeah.
There's so many things you can do. And that's a long conversation within my training as well, because that one's tough when you show up and you can't find it and you don't want to look goofy walking around not knowing what you're doing, right? There's alternatives, but I always recommend take your time to find it first. A lot of people think, well, you just go up on the roof. Yeah, you can, but you're taking, a camera up there that some of these cameras can be $10,000, $12,000, and you're taking it up on top of the roof. If that thing goes off the roof, I can tell you when it hits the ground, it's probably going to be worth $0. And it's not going to be a good day. So before you go up on the roof, I always like to walk around, and there's a couple different things people do closest to the street or wherever it should be exiting. And you can usually, by process elimination, start finding out where it is and actually locate it, which is really cool, because then you get to tell your, like the buyer, this client that's going to own the home, where it is, and they don't have to worry about when they have a backup, somebody having to go and pull their toilet. So if you can find it that way, that's great. The other option is they may have to go through the roof, and some of these new homes, they don't even have 3 or 4 inch pipes up on the roof now. A lot of them are just 2 inch and 1.5 inch. So you might come up with another problem where it's like, well, now the roof isn't there, and some plumbers and some companies will then resort to pulling a toilet.
Okay.
How big is the camera? What's the minimum diameter size opening you need to go through?
They all vary, which is really cool. If you take the time to get a couple pieces of equipment, you can go into a 1.5 inch pipe with some cameras, which is going to be your smallest pipe. So if you were in a bathroom, you could go through the little clean out in the cabinet below the sink and find something that's localized, which you'd probably use it more for that than doing the whole sewer line, because that's a smaller camera, harder to push farther. But if somebody's having a problem just in one bathroom on one side of the house, that could be an option to go through a smaller clean out. Otherwise, most of the time people want to access a 3 or 4 inch pipe, which is just a lot easier. And you can use a heavier cable and push that cable much further to go whatever distance they may have to go to get to the sewer main or septic tank.
What length of cable do you use?
That is a really good question. There's so much out there. Anything under 100 feet, I don't use it. I don't recommend it unless it's something for localized, like you're getting some real small specialty camera. Sure. But otherwise, what I recommend is anything over 100 feet.
Okay.
So I use 115 because most states by code require a clean out every 100 feet. And that's so they can service the line. If they have to run a cabler or a hydrojetter, they can go 100 feet, with the snake and clean it out. So there should be a clean out. So if you're running 115 foot, it shouldn't be a problem. And a lot of guys, including my team, we like to have a 200-foot reel, which is a little bit thicker, because on these older homes, it was before code. So they don't have a clean out every 100 feet. But if we want to try to get to that city main or wherever it terminates, we want that 200 feet so we can push it a lot further.
Sure. Makes sense. And then you talked about pulling toilets. When you have to do that, what does that involve?
Pulling toilets, fun conversation. Half the room is always like, I would never do it. I'm not touching a toilet. No way. And the other half is, I'm open to it. They really are. And when you get out in the market too, some people understand that you don't want to pull a toilet because you are disconnecting the water and you're opening up, the sewer line to get it from the toilet. But what's involved is not that bad. And the way I teach it, it really should only add about 10 more minutes, tops 15, if you got a situation, to actually getting the service done. And there's some really cool stuff like pickup sticks, which if you ever look up a pickup sticks with a X, it's a little like a spring-loaded rod that you can slip right into the bowl and just pick up a toilet one-handed. No problem.
Wow.
Because the biggest fear everybody has about a toilet is hugging somebody else's bowl. Like, ugh, like, that doesn't sound exciting. But if you got the right tools, and I go over all that in the training so that people are prepared, it's pretty easy and it's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of little tricks you can use. And once you've done a couple, it's easy. And most people have at some point probably had to pull or install a toilet. And lots of like home inspectors come from trades backgrounds. So usually almost everybody in the room has raised their hand when I ask who's pulled a toilet, so.
You ever get called back because one leaked or something after you put it back in place and had to sort of deal with that?
That is a great question. And when we've had one leak, it usually is because it was an older water line. So we've carry water lines to try to overcome that. If it's the valve that's an issue, that's just an issue we found. That is not us. We didn't cause that. We write it up in our report. And then the other one that a lot of people worry about that we've run into, so if anybody's got any questions about that, it does happen, is the flange that's connected to the sewer line is all rusted out. So that's what's securing the toilet down, and we'll pull it. We'll see it's all rusted away. And we just take a photo of it and document it because it needs to be replaced. We actually found out that the problem exists there because if the toilet isn't secured, there is a chance that it could move and that can create a break of the seal and other problems. So finding that out, that's a good thing. And if it's rusted away, it's probably because it's been leaking, which means it could cause damage to subflooring. It could lead to mold. That's category 3 water leak. That's bacteria and, all the yucky stuff. So finding out that is not a bad thing.
Now, what about the gasket? Do you put a new gasket in?
Yes. Oh yeah. The wax bowl ring. Now they got these rubber gaskets, which are really cool as well. Yes. And it's pretty straightforward. To when you're going to go and replace it, you might have to scrape off the old wax because it's pretty sticky and it's all yucky, and you just scrape it off, throw that aside. When you're ready to put the new one on, you just put the ring or the sleeve right on top of the flange, and then you just set the toilet.
And then what about caulking it at the floor?
Caulking at the floor. They do recommend caulking at the floor, and yes, we do that. You don't want to caulk the back, but you just caulk along the edges, front, around the back. It's pretty straightforward. If you got a clear caulking, that's nice. A white usually works too, because most toilets today are white, unless you get some, vintage old home, which might not match if it's white line. But yeah, caulk it, seal it, but it's not actually to close the whole thing off. Usually the back's left open. You're done. It's pretty straightforward.
Ishran, it sounds when you use a locator like that's an extra additional one step beyond what most people are doing. Is that what you're finding too? And do you teach people to use it because you may as well just find the problem right away instead of having somebody else come out and do the exact same thing?
That is correct. Now, depending on the level of your locating, you could do it as a courtesy. You could sell it as a service. A lot of people don't get it. They don't see the need for it because it is an extra expense. It's an extra tool that you have to purchase. And you're probably using it only, 25 to 50% of the time. Most of the time, you're just going through cleanouts. You do the sewer scan, and then you're done. So there's really nothing to locate. But in cases where if I go through the roof, sure, I can go down the roof. I can get through the sewer line. It drops in the city main. I saw what was there, what wasn't there. But along the way, I noticed there was cleanouts. Even though visually I can't see them in the yard, now as a courtesy, I can pull the camera back to where I see the cleanouts. That way my camera's sitting right below them, pull out my locator, and now I can identify where those are for the client. So it adds an extra level to your service of the things that you can do. So if you're pulling a toilet, once again, and they do have cleanouts, you can identify them while the camera's in the sewer line going through the toilet. And then if you do have damage, like I've been hired to locate a sewer line that went under the garage because they wanted to enclose part of the garage. It was a fairly large garage, and they wanted to create another guest room. They said, we know the sewer line goes through here and we want to put another bathroom in this area. Could you come out and locate it? And I was able to locate it, tell them where it is. I usually tell them that's within, 12 inches. So I kind of like make it like a 2-foot diameter circle. So it's an area, it's not precise. I mean, that thing could be 3 feet, 5 feet down, depending on the situation. But there are many cases where you can use that locator and sell other services.
That's just a great idea. And it's such good data and valuable data. And you just paid for the cost of that service if you eliminated 1 hour of a plumber's time fooling around trying to figure out where that line is.
I agree. And you're already in there. If you had to go through the toilet, you could locate it and the next person doesn't have to pull the toilet again. So these are things that, yes, it takes your service a step and above. And if you're somebody buying a house, and that person is doing sewer camera inspections, knowing they have a locator is good to ask. That way they can locate anything that might need to be, as well as maybe they're not giving estimates for repairs, but to know that the roots, because they saw one area that there's roots, they know it's in the middle of the yard. That could be $1,000, $2,000, as opposed to they can tell you, hey, it's underneath your concrete driveway, or it's in the street in the asphalt, which is a whole nother price once you get out into the street, it like doubles in cost. So it really can help the home buyer understand what kind of repair they're looking at as they're going out and start getting estimates to get that repair done.
And along those lines, I guess I just have a more general question, Istvan, is, it sounds like most states don't have any sort of licensing or requirements for people doing sewer inspections, except for, we've talked about Texas. But, if you're a home buyer or you're a real estate agent, you're looking for someone to do a sewer inspection, like, what would be your recommendations for credentialing or experience? Because, you said you had some minimum training, but then when you got out there, you realized you needed a lot more. And so I'm just curious, like, what kind of training should someone have before they're competent at doing this? And how long does it take?
That's a great question. Getting certified. There are a couple options out there along with, the class that I do, but getting a certification where you're actually working with somebody who's done it before, who can answer all the questions, show all the different types, what the common problems are, what kind of issues you're looking for, getting that beforehand view of a lot of the stuff through a camera lens, because when you're in there, you got to think about it. It's a camera, but it's in a sewer line. So there's sewage, there's roots, there's toilet paper, there's all sorts of other things that can get in the way and obstruct the view and make it hard to assess the pipe. So get trained, really get trained, and work with somebody if you need to as well. Mentorships is always a great way to get more experience. And then once you're ready to dive into it, you're going to get that equipment, go out and do a couple with people that Go do a couple homes for free, offer the service for a discount, whatever it is to get that experience, so that when you're out there doing this for somebody who's paying you, who needs to know that information before they make a purchase, you have the experience.
I just want to ask from Tessa's standpoint, I think she's asking more on the side of the consumer. What would a consumer look for? Like if they're going to hire a home inspector to do their sewer inspection, how do they know that they're not learning how to do this on your house?
That's perfect. Thank you for that. With the realtors and the home buyers, the consumers, ask what kind of training they have. Ask if they have a certification. Because maybe they don't have a certification, but they came from a plumbing background where they did plumbing for 20 years. That's a lot of experience. That's a great thing. To ask any inspector or service provider what their credentials are, I think is a smart thing for any consumer to do. As a home inspector, I loved it when somebody would grill me on like, well, what do you do? What do you know? What's your background? Like, it was an opportunity to share with them the knowledge that I have. So if you're the consumer, you want this service and the person is not willing to even answer those questions, you probably wouldn't want to work with them. Obviously, they're not going to be much help after the service is done. So ask the questions. Yeah, ask what kind of certifications they have and what kind of experience. I think those are great questions to ask anybody, especially if you're going to be referring them as a real estate agent. Know who you're referring.
And if you were to talk to your former self before you had all this knowledge and wisdom, like what were some things that you wish you would have known going into it that you know now?
Seeking out the experience, the knowledge. It really comes down to that. You don't know what you don't know. So if we go into things thinking that we know everything, we're setting ourselves up and we're, for failure, and we're not protecting the people that we're trying to help. So ask questions. I wish I'd spend more time seeking out somebody else who could have kind of held my hand at the beginning and really set me up. So I didn't have to figure it all out on my own.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
mentorship,
Yeah,
all about
mentorship.
mentorships and working with other people that have the knowledge and experience that you're looking to acquire.
Gosh,
That would have helped me
100%.
out.
We at Structure Tech, we have an internal app and Facebook page that we use to inspectors to communicate with each other. And it's amazing. Like even inspectors who have been doing this for 10, 15 years, like every once in a while, like they'll still have a question that they post. And it's great to see people that are humble enough to be like, I don't know everything, and here's a question for anyone. And it usually, I mean, it helps educate all of us on the team. We learn from each other if we're open enough and willing enough to ask those questions,
Istvan, any other thoughts before we wrap up? I know we're close at time here, but anything we didn't touch on that you wanted to get to today?
No, really. I mean, you mentioned about some of the other things that I do. One of the things that I really love is I love inspiring other people. I love inspiring people to step out and do the things that they've always dreamed of. So that's one of the reasons that I wrote my book, The Victory Mindset. And it was to share my story about the struggles that I went through, just that people could relate and find inspiration there to develop that passion and drive to go out after their dreams and start living the life that they've always wanted to live. That's something that's on my heart, that I always love to help other people, find their passion. If they're not sure where it is, love to talk with them, love to give inspiration. And yeah, I want to see people living lives that are just passionately driven, making amazing things happen, whether it's for themselves or for others. I'm not, that's up to them. But when it is for others, when they're building things, creating things that are helping other people, love it. It's like,
Istvan, what was the
really my heart.
process of writing a book like?
It wasn't as hard as I thought. I did have a little bit of help. I did most of the writing, but they kind of cleaned up my language because, I needed help there. It was my story. It was good because it really gave me an opportunity to just reflect on these experiences in my life. I'm really at peace with them, but, there are things at one point in my life that I really struggled with, and to be able to reflect on it and see what I've overcome and all the excitement for the things I still want to do. It was a great experience.
Sounds very cathartic, kind of cut away some of that baggage that may have lingered. It's cool.
Thanks for sharing that. You said it was called The Victory Mindset.
The Victory Mindset.
Where can we find it?
You can find it on Amazon.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And just, I don't want to linger too long on this because I know you got to go, but how long did it take you to do that?
I had been writing it probably, I'd say by the time I really, really focused on getting it done, 1.5 years, 2 years. there was a process, because
Yeah.
as you start writing, you start realizing at a certain point, you're like, I'm almost done. And then you're like, I'm not done. You want to start keep changing things. And at a certain point, you have to realize, you know what, I want to get my message out, and nothing's ever perfect. You know, but the message was there, and that's what was important. And I wanted to share that.
Cool.
That sounds like Ruben saying done is better than perfect.
It's a good saying.
Right? Yeah, I'm fond of that.
Yeah. Well, Istvan, thanks for giving us some time today. I'm sure we should do a part 2 to dig into some other aspects of who you are and some of your entrepreneurial adventures. And so if you're up for it, we'd love to have you back at some point here in the future.
Would love to, anytime. It would be great to be here with you guys. It's been a pleasure.
Let's put a close on this episode, but Istvan, can you tell everybody how they can get a hold of you if they want to set up some training or talk a little bit more about your book?
Yes. Awesome. Well, the book, real quick, that's Amazon.com, Istvan Zsako, Zsako, The Victory Mindset. And for the sewer training, anybody that's looking to get sewer training, they can go to sewertraining.com, and they can either do online at their own pace, or they can join us for one of the live sessions, which I really recommend, so you can get your hands on a live camera and actually leave with real experience ready to start offering that service.
Awesome. And Ruben, we don't do this enough, but where can everybody send questions to?
Send them to podcast@structuretech.com.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. You've been listening to Structure Talk, a Structure Tech presentation. My name is Bill Ulrich alongside Tessa Murray and Ruben Saltzman. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.
For more information on how we can provide you with the right information about your home before you buy or sell, contact us at structuretech.com.